Hello, welcome to the Cinema Savvy Movie Podcast, the channel for film reviews, discussions and everything in between. I'm Chris Garner, joined once again with my co-host George Aldridge, and on today's main show we'll be bringing you our review on the recent Tom Hardy crime thriller Legend. Later on in the show we'll also have another edition of Film Fights and our recommended movie. Before we get into our week in movie news though, I wanted to mention that our film club review of Attack the Block obviously meant to come out last week, but what we've decided to do is, with scheduling conflicts, we pushed it back to this week, so we'll have a joint review of that with whatever I pick for our recommended movie this week. But anyway, let's crack on with the show and we'll get into our rundown on the week in movie news. So George, what do we got first?
The first bit of news is probably the biggest of the week. It's Warner Brothers, who own the rights to King Kong and Godzilla, are pushing ahead now with the King Kong v Godzilla film. I think most people would have seen this coming, but the kind of smaller details is that it's supposedly going to come after Skull Island and after Godzilla 2, so it's basically going to be King Kong 2.5, Godzilla 2.5, or 3.5, whatever it is. But it's going to be interesting to see how they do it, I think.
Yeah, and it's a sad world we live in when King Kong versus Godzilla is doing a better job and a better pace than the whole DC cinematic universe is with bringing its new characters in. But yeah, I think this was rumoured for quite a while. Obviously, as well, this film was done like years ago, like when King Kong and Godzilla were big, and they sort of brought out the straight to DVD films of them, and they got kind of ridiculous, like Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, all that stuff. So I think this came out around that time as well. But yeah, with Skull Island coming out, I guess they do want to set up a kind of cinematic universe. It seems to be the typical trend now. Marvel obviously kicked it off. DC are doing it. Spider-Man wanted to do it as well, so it's nothing new there. And with Skull Island, though, it's going to be interesting because that's not going to be a straight-up retelling of the King Kong story, is it? That's going to be more like an origin story, sort of exploring the island, and we'll definitely see King Kong in that movie because it would be a bit stupid if they didn't show him off. I think Tom Hiddleston's the main actor in that movie, so if he does make it through that movie, I'm sure they'll probably bring him into King Kong versus Godzilla as well to give that a bit more credibility with the actors. But we mentioned this as well, like, we've seen Godzilla now briefly in the film that he was in, even though he only appeared for like 10 minutes in it. But he's massive, so it's going to be a question of how big are they actually going to make King Kong, because if you want it a fair fight, ideally you've got to make him exactly the same height. If you have sort of, like, even if you go by how big King Kong was in Peter Jackson's movie, he's not even going to come up to like Godzilla's knee, is he? So it's going to be a weird one, and it'll be a question of how big they actually make King Kong to make it a fair fight.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, you can't make King Kong too big because he's still got to climb the Empire State Building. But Godzilla was so big that, you know, he was hiding in the skyscrapers. And it's going to be one of them. I know you mentioned earlier that it could be like Yoda Count Dooku. I could see it like that. I really hope it's not, because I've always hated that. But
Yeah.
it's going to be one of them where I've always pictured kind of, you know, King Kong like running up the tail and shit, or doing something like that. But I've got no idea how it's going to work. I really hope they don't do some crap thing where Godzilla's suddenly shrunk, or King Kong, you know, has a potion and he's now bigger. It's just going to be destruction porn. Warner Bros.
Yeah.
Doing Batman v Superman, we know how that's going to be. I think this is going to have like global destruction 10 times bigger than that. It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be one of them films where I hope it's average, but it's like mental enough to like be entertaining. Do you know what I mean? That kind of summer blockbuster. But I really hope they're not having some serious drama and some pathetic human nonsense going on, and just showing them fighting.
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up as well. Like, unlike Godzilla, I want to actually see the fight this time, especially with King Kong versus Godzilla. I don't want the whole panning away to humans or cutting away and stuff like that, because that really got irritating in the first film. Like, it was okay for the first 40 minutes when it was sort of teasing the big reveal to Godzilla, but I mean, once you show him off, you just got to go all in and just show the action.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, they missed out on that, which is hopefully a mistake they're going to rectify. It'll be interesting to see who they get to direct it. Whether or not they go back to the director of the original Godzilla, who's filming Star Wars now, because it'll be way after that. And he'd also latched on to do Godzilla 2, or whether they get the Skull Island director, who I don't know if they've actually got one yet. I know a few of the cast dropped out. I'm not sure if the director did, but it's one of them films where it's got a lot of potential to go wrong, and if they get it right, it'll be right.
Yeah, and I hope it is, because I do think it has a property that it's going to be like a typical B movie kind of plot anyway, just inherently, because that's what both properties are. But I hope it's done well, and I hope they show off some good action. But as I've said, like this will be a couple of years off yet before this thing even gets off the ground. But our next bit of news, Incredibles 2, apparently three-quarters of the script have been complete, and now they've pushed the release date ahead, so it's coming out before Cars 3. Well, Cars 3, they just keep that to the side, but Incredibles 2, as I said, like it's always been a Pixar property. I think fans have been like, there's been an outcry for a sequel since the first one pretty much ended, to be honest. And I think more than any other Pixar film, I think that Incredibles is the one that shows the most promise for sequels, and I think it could literally just go on and on and on. And if three-quarters of the script are done, I mean that makes sense because they're going to have to start. Well, they'll have already started animating, I assume, because it takes years to get all the animation done. But yeah, I don't know if this is a first draft or if this is going to be the completed script at the end. I'm assuming that this is first draft still at this stage, and then they'll sort of fine tune it and everything like that. But Pixar are usually good with release dates. I think that this year, or sorry, the last year was the only year that they didn't have any release at all. I think they had some problems with The Good Dinosaur, so that's why this year we're getting both Inside Out and The Good Dinosaur in November. But yeah, just based on the thing that the script's almost done and that we're going to get this before Cars 3, so they're going to save the worst till last. I'm completely fine with that.
Yeah, and I think the interview with Brad Bird, I'm not sure whether it was like a tweet or a TV one, but he was just there like, yeah, we're three-quarters of the way there. I think he went on talking about how back then there was only Spider-Man and X-Men, and now there's loads of superhero things. So it's kind of talking about the difficulties, but then he kind of dropped the release date a bit, and I think that might be June 2018 or something now,
Mm.
because you've got Toy Story in 2017. Then obviously this will be 2018, and Cars will take the 2019 slot. And it's weird with Cars 3 because we don't like them, but the kids love them. I mean, merchandise-wise, that's apparently Pixar's most profitable now,
Mm.
and it's crazy to think that. But I think I'm not a big fan of The Incredibles, but I just dislike it naturally, but I can understand why a lot of people love it, and it still is the best Fantastic Four film. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with the sequel, whether they have them at kids' ages still, or if they have them all a bit older. I don't know, but to be
I think
fair,
they'll probably have aged them up, to be honest.
yeah, I think it'll be interesting with Brad Bird. 'Cause obviously, Tomorrowland wasn't great, but animation is his strong point.
Oh, definitely. And as you said, like when I first saw it, I wasn't too keen on Incredibles as well. It sort of grew on me over the years, but it's still not up there as among my favourite Pixar films. We talked about this in our Pixar rundown anyway, but I am looking forward to the sequel, and I think there are some good places that the story could go, but we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. Our next bit of news is that, onto other animation news, Minions is now the second highest grossing animated film of all time. It's overtook Toy Story 3. This somewhat depresses me. I can't exactly badmouth Minions because I haven't seen any of the Despicable Me movies and I haven't seen Minions. Um, they're just the Minions are just characters that have always annoyed me, so I've always wanted to try and avoid them as much as I can. But I think international release of this film really did help boost it. It was already up there, and I think that this has just tipped it over the edge. It's a real shame because Toy Story 3 is, as I said, like one of my favourite animated films of all time. Really great closure to that trilogy. But obviously, everything's still going to be trailing behind Frozen, isn't it? Unfortunately, but to get it up that high, it shows that people have still got interest in these characters, and because of this, we'll probably get a Despicable Me 3 and probably a Minions 2 as well after this, movie's like finished.
Yeah, and it's quite an odd one. I think it came out in China. It was one of its later markets a few weeks ago, and it did incredible over there. So I think that's the one that's boosted over the billion mark. But kids are just mental for it. I mean, I'm not keen on them. I think they work in Despicable Me, but I couldn't do 2 hours of it. And I think that's what a lot of people have said. But it's such
Mm.
a shame that that's going to be like number two. I mean, I'm not big on Frozen, but I can understand why it's there. It's going to be the kind of the Lion King of the next generation.
Yeah.
Toy Story 3, one of the best animated films of all time. Bit a massive shame that it's been taken over now, but that record's going to get broken eventually. But it's just quite bizarre. Like, I knew this would make a lot of money, but I never ever anticipated over a billion. And then, you can look at 2015 in general. I think that's the fourth billion-dollar film now.
Yeah, and when sort of people towards the beginning of the year were predicting what was going to get a billion, Minions was one that was often talked about, but then people saw Inside Out and other Pixar films and thought, well, actually, no, probably they'll get a billion instead. But it just goes to show I don't think Inside Out quite made the billion. I know it got quite up there, but I don't think it ever reached anywhere close to a billion. So it just shows that animated movies are still popular, and I think it was a matter of timing as well. I'm not sure if there was anything out for like kids when this came out, so I think that this was a big draw inherently just because of that. I think that Inside Out was probably still in theaters, but I think it was sort of winding up its release, and I think that the initial buzz came out from Inside Out, a few weeks before this came out. So yeah, definitely, it's impressive that it's got this high up, and we'll probably get sequels, no doubt, because of this. But it is a shame that it's overtook Toy Story 3. But on to our next bit of news. Tom Cruise is apparently going to be reuniting with director Doug Liman for a new sci-fi film called Luna Park. I don't know if any plot details have been released about this. To be honest, this was the first time I'd heard about this, but we know that Lyman and Cruise were a really good duo and team in Edge of Tomorrow. We've talked about that before in our review. We've said that that's one of our favourite films of that year. Really, really cool film. So I don't know what the plot's going to be like to this. I don't know what the idea is behind it, but I'm sure with his direction, and Tom Cruise is just the man recently, what with Edge of Tomorrow and with Mission Impossible 5, so I'm sure it's going to be an interesting one to go out and see.
Yeah, and it's quite odd with this because they've just finished filming, I believe, an action thriller which is due out January 2016. And obviously, Edge of Tomorrow was great. Clearly, Tom Cruise liked him. He came back to him. Clearly, this new one's doing even better. So they want the third film together. With it being sci-fi, I'm just wondering what type of sci-fi we're gonna get. Is it gonna be hardcore, like sort of Interstellar and The Martian, or is it gonna be the kind of double of sort of action adventure type like your Star Wars is? I don't know. But the fact that Tom Cruise has kind of brought himself back up into the box office, and he is taking these more interesting projects nowadays. He's sort of not taking himself less seriously, but he's not, straight up having these dramatic films every time. Like, say, War of the Worlds came out tomorrow, it'd be a very different Tom Cruise performance to what it was 10 years ago. So I think it'll be one of them where it'll just be quite good.
Yeah, and he did go through that phase, didn't he, with more sort of serious, dramatic roles. But I guess that shows what a good actor he is and how, he can blend between different genres. But I'll agree with that. More recently, he seems to be doing these more fun, action-packed films. Even Edge of Tomorrow was a bit tongue-in-cheek, I thought, in parts as well. I don't know if this is based on like a graphic novel or anything like Edge of Tomorrow was. Maybe it's a completely original idea. I'm not sure, but as I said, like Tom Cruise is just cranking out these action movies. Like he's not getting any younger, so I think he wants to just have as much fun as he can and just do these films while he can and while he's still in the shape to do them. So I'll look out for a trailer whenever this is coming out. I'm assuming it's still going to be a few years off yet if it's still really early in pre-production, but I think it's definitely one to watch out for when it does come out. On to our next bit of news now. I'm about to get on the hate train for this one. Apparently, the classic Patrick Swayze movie Roadhouse is getting a remake, and Ronda Rousey will be playing the lead character. Um, oh boy, Roadhouse, the original, is one of the best sort of action movies that came out around that time. I think it was early 90s, if not late 80s. I'm going to check now, but it's an absolute classic. It's an absolute classic Patrick Swayze movie. Yeah, 1989 it came out. It's just not a movie that needs a remake. It was definitely of its time. It's sort of an enjoyably dumb action movie, but it had some great action in there. It had a fantastic soundtrack, and Sam Elliott was in the movie as well alongside Patrick. So it's just an absolute classic that everyone should see. It does not need a remake, and with the whole Ronda Rousey thing, like I know she's done acting before. She was in Expendables 3, and she wasn't, to be honest, she wasn't even the worst thing in that movie. It just seems really unnecessary. Like, just do another movie. Like, you can make it like Roadhouse if you want. Just don't call it Roadhouse. And that's just really my opinion on it. Like, it's not going to be as good as the original. Clearly, it seems sort of. I don't know whether it's sort of cashing in on the current like fame of Ronda Rousey with her UFC fighting and everything like that, and it just seems like, oh, while she's popular, let's get another movie out. Um, in short, it just doesn't need to be Roadhouse.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen Roadhouse, but I know his reputation. I kind of know there's the inner joke that Patrick Swayze, he's not this big, broad, tough guy. Obviously, he's clearly good at it, but I don't understand how you can go from a reputation of that to a lead character to the UFC Women's Champion that would probably be able to knock out The Rock,
Hmm.
someone who's just so like brutal that it's going to be pointless. Like we all know, she gets 30-second knockouts every match. This film's it's going to be easy for her, and I think she is trying to boost up her acting reputation, which is fair enough. You know, she's in Fast and Furious. She suits that kind of action franchise, but they really don't need another remake. And if you're trying to make her this actress, give her her own film, her own action film, just like The Rock had to start off slowly with stuff like Snitch, um, Hercules. He did a lot of smaller films before he hit the big time. That's what he needs to do with her. You can't keep chucking her in these big films. But she needs to build up her reputation through that, and she's already got it through UFC. I think most people in the world know who she is now, but there is no need for a Roadhouse remake with her.
No, and I think whoever's directing it, I'm not sure exactly what the team is behind this one, but I think they probably did see her scene from Expendables 3 in that she's a bouncer at a club, and the Expendables team walk in and they go, oh, she's a woman, she's a lady, she's what's she gonna do? And then they see her just like whoop an entire club of like people that are causing hassle and just like completely knock them out. And that's when they bring her on the team in Expendables 3. So I think whoever is directing this probably saw that scene and thought, you know what, we could just take this scene and put it in Roadhouse, and it just doesn't need to be done. Everyone knows my opinions on remakes, and it just seems like a really, really pointless one to me. And then I guess if I'm leading on from this, if we skip ahead just one of the news items, Sony have not exactly ruled out a sequel to RoboCop, the remake. Again, RoboCop from the 80s, an absolute classic. He's one of the most, I would say, iconic looking protagonists of any film out there. You see him, everyone knows it's RoboCop, and that I haven't actually seen the remake. I think it was quite divisive. I know that a lot of fans of the original sort of saw it as blasphemy that it got a remake and how it turned out, and then other sort of casual fans thought they did a few new things with it, which some were cool, some elements of it were cool, some were pretty bad. But I think it made quite a lot. I think it did fairly well, so a sequel wouldn't surprise me. But again, pointless remakes. Just leave it. Just leave it alone. Just let it be a thing from the 80s and move on. Create a new property. Make it like RoboCop if you want. I'm not opposed to like, because how many gangster films are out there where the plot's exactly the same? How someone starts out well and then through drugs or crime it just leads to a life of tragedy. We're going to talk about that in Legend later on. It's nothing new. So make a film about a guy who gets put in a robot suit. That's fine. It just does not need to be RoboCop, and that's my opinion on remakes.
Yeah, with RoboCop, it's a weird one. Like I've seen the original, I hadn't seen the sequels to the originals. Heard they weren't as good, so I never bothered. And then I saw the remake, and then when I watched it, I thought, this isn't a bad film.
Mm.
It's just there was no need for this to be a remake. It could work on its own. They tried new things that one or two bits worked, but it didn't. If it hadn't have been RoboCop, I think a lot of people would have liked it. It would have probably made a little bit more money, in all honesty, and it would have suited because you can't have a 12A RoboCop, and they did that. And they tried to half rip off one or two things from the original, nothing slapping in your face like, haha, this is that. But it was an interesting take on it, but there was no need for it. They should have had it as its own thing. It would have worked perfectly. But
Yeah,
I don't think it made a lot of money, and I just don't think they need a sequel. But you know what, Sony, like, they don't have a clue how to run their businesses these days.
yeah, that's true. And you brought up the fact that you watched the original RoboCop, you haven't seen the sequels. I haven't seen RoboCop 3, but I've heard it's absolutely terrible. But I would quite recommend checking out RoboCop 2, because if we're going to bring this back to Star Wars as we usually do, Irving Kershner actually directed it. And it's not a bad movie, RoboCop 2, so I'd definitely check out that one, give RoboCop 3 a miss. But our next bit of news, Olivia Cooke has been cast as a female lead in Ready Player One. Ready Player One, I believe, is the Steven Spielberg movie, isn't it? The sci-fi one, or
Yeah.
dystopian future based on the novel. As I said, I don't know anything about the novel or the plot, so whenever this eventually rolls out, I'll be going into this one cold. I don't think this is coming out this year, is it? Or obviously, if she's just been cast, it's not coming out this year. This will probably be out next year, probably later on in the year, I would assume. It doesn't seem like a summer movie to me, but I may be mistaken. This seems more like sort of going for Oscars movie, I would assume, but I may be wrong. You probably know more about this than me, so if you want to take this one.
Yeah, I mean, Olivia Cooke, I haven't seen her in anything. I think she's quite young, quite new to it. I believe she's in this film that's got a very good reputation. It's called, I think, Me, Jane and the Iron Girl. I've just done that horrifically.
Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So that was meant to be great, and she's obviously come off that into this. I still haven't read Ready Player One, but I've only heard great things about it. So it's on the reading list to get to eventually. But a lot of the fans are happy with the casting so far, and I think it might have an October or November release date next year or
Mm.
2017. I don't know if there's going to be a lot of CGI because it's meant to be very video game-ish, some sort of utopian stuff, but it'll be interesting. It's very interesting. I think I look at Tomorrowland compared to this, where another young female lead, and it's one of them where that could most likely be a boy or a girl. It doesn't have to be a girl, so just one of them where people weren't moaning saying, "Oh, it's just a strong woman" or something. Apparently, it's just a normal character. She's been cast as a woman, well, obviously written as a woman too, but
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this is a film. As I said, like I don't know anything about it, so I can't really talk in depth into it. But I've checked. I think she was in a Ouija as well. I know that was a bad film, but I'm sure that wasn't her fault. I'm sure she's a great actress, and if Spielberg's cast her as the lead, then he definitely sees potential in her. Although I'm not going to get on the Shia LaBeouf hype train, but he also did cast Shia LaBeouf as the main character in Indiana Jones 4, so I guess we could question him a bit. We'll pin that down as just like the one awful Spielberg movie. Our next bit of news, though, Kate Mara, who plays the Invisible Woman in the recent Fantastic Four movie, she still hasn't actually seen the movie. She was put off by critic reviews and Josh Trank's tweet. This doesn't surprise me. We've already done a review on Fantastic Four, which you can find on our channel as well. But you said, didn't you, that none of the cast seemed interested in it, and we got that from like press releases, and even at Comic Con, they were just sort of like sleepwalking through the interviews. We knew they weren't enthusiastic in it, and I don't think any of them had seen the film before the premiere. So it's still kind of weird because I thought she would have seen it at the premiere with everyone. I assumed that she was there. Um, it doesn't surprise me though if she hasn't seen it. I mean, we've talked about all the problems with the film and the production, so I'm not going to harp on it again. But if when they were filming, they clearly had a different film in mind than what it turned out like with studio involvement or whatever it was, I guess that could be really frustrating as an actor, and especially if you were called in for reshoots like a couple of months before. They clearly know it's a mess, so they won't waste their time with it. I don't think it was any of their problems. We know that all of the cast members in it are fine actors on their own, really, really fantastic actors. They're going to have great careers regardless of this. It's just going to be one of those one bad movies in their careers, unfortunately. But I don't think it's going to do anything to ruin their future career or anything like that.
no, I mean most of them moved on. I think Kate Mara, she's in House of Cards, I believe, and that's got the reputation.
I think she's in The Martian this year as well, isn't she?
Yep, she is. Then
Yep.
there's obviously Michael J. Fox, who is no way Michael B. Jordan.
Michael B.
That's
Jordan.
a very different Michael Fox. Yeah, Michael B. Jordan.
I'm keeping that in.
Jesus, Michael B. Jordan, who is obviously going to be in Creed. Already been in Fruitvale Station, which we reviewed, and Chronicle, which was actually decent, another Josh Trank film. Then you've kind of got Miles Teller, who was in Whiplash, and it's just one of them where I think it's just all a crap film. They all knew it, and I bet none of them have probably seen it.
And the
Although
guy who plays Ben Grimm was in Billy Elliot.
he is Billy Elliot. I think she also said she denied that there was a fight between Miles Teller and Josh Trank on set.
Mm,
Whether she's just done that for the hell of it, but I'm really waiting for the documentary behind this film
mm.
because the film making of this film is going to be better than the film.
I can almost imagine like when the DVD and Blu-ray of this movie eventually rolls out, it's going to have like no special features because no one will have want to have come back to do interviews or even like associate themselves with it. So it's going to be really interesting. I won't buy the film, like God no, I won't buy the film just to see the special features, but they'll be put up on the internet probably anyway on YouTube and stuff like that. So I'll definitely check them out. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me that she hasn't seen the movie. And then going on to more hopeful superhero news, hopefully. Wonder Woman starts filming in November, obviously with Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. And there's rumours that Eva Green may be cast as a villain. As you said, like before we started recording, these are just rumours. I absolutely love Eva Green to death. I think she's a fantastic actress. I don't know practically anything about the Wonder Woman comic, to be honest. I know, obviously, of the character of Wonder Woman and sort of what her shtick is. She has the invisible jet. She has the lasso of truth or whatever it's called. But I know nothing of her rogues gallery, so I don't know if any like big comic aficionados know what kind of character Eva Green may be playing. But it makes sense they're filming in November. This will be coming out shortly after Suicide Squad and Batman v Superman. I think this comes out early 2017, doesn't it? Wonder Woman,
Yeah.
and they'll be putting everything in place to sort of get their DC cinematic universe off up to a running start. It's all going to hinge on whether Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad is a success. But if they're already starting filming in November, then I think they've sort of got their vision down and they just want to get on with it, and hopefully, well, I don't want to see DC fail. I think they do have some great characters. In fact, overall probably I do prefer DC's material more to Marvel actually, but it's just going to be one of them. It's all going to depend on what Batman v Superman turns like, because when we watch it, we've seen the trailer, it does seem a lot more comic booky than Man of Steel was, and I think that's definitely the route they need to go to make the success, especially with a character like Wonder Woman, who herself is quite out there and a bit sort of wacky herself. So yeah, huge buy for me for this one.
Yeah, and it's one of them where I don't know an awful lot about Wonder Woman. However, you're right about DC. Their graphic novels, their comics are far superior to Marvel. Just because Marvel's winning the films at the minute doesn't mean anything, but it's one of them where this film will probably be good. Obviously, that's just a guess this minute, but if they've got Eva Green, then at least as a villain that she's going to be incredible because she's always great in everything she's in.
Yeah, and we saw her in play the villain in 300: Rise of an Empire. That film itself wasn't that great. It wasn't awful, but she was definitely the best thing in that movie. And when she plays a bad guy, I think she can go all out serious with it. But most of the time, it seems sort of not overacting, but it does seem very tongue in cheek. But I do think she's a great actress as well. She's also one of the best things I would say in Casino Royale as well, which is probably my favourite Bond movie so far. So yeah, definitely going to look forward to that if the rumours are true, of course, because they're only rumours at the minute. So they may cast someone else. It may turn out to be completely false. We'll have to see. And then on to other DC news with Batman v Superman. Zack Snyder has said that the film will contain more Batman than Superman. To be honest, that's probably why Batman gets top billing in the title and not Superman. It is a little frustrating, I guess, because when this came out, it did seem very much like it was going to be a sequel to Man of Steel, which it is, but with a greater focus on Superman. I think I've spoken about my thoughts before with Man of Steel. I really, really actually kind of loathed that movie. So after seeing it, because it did like a really piss poor job of bringing Clark Kent and Superman out as a character, it was very much a sort of 2.5 hours of non-stop action, and it was really grim and depressing and not much joy in it at all. I was hoping that they would do a sequel to Man of Steel just focused on Superman, sort of fleshing his character out and actually letting us get to know him as a person before they bring Batman into it. Obviously, they've just they want to make a rush for the Justice League, so they're going to have to try and bring in every character they can to try and catch up with Marvel with this. But to be honest, I'm not that fussed about it. I think we're still going to get a decent amount of Superman in there, continuing the story. We saw the trailer. It looks like it's still focusing on the turmoil after Man of Steel and sort of him wrestling with, is he a good guy or a bad guy based on what he's done. And I do think if you are sort of setting up all the Justice League characters, especially a character as big and as infamous as Batman, I do think you need to give him a lot more focus. Everyone knows the story of Batman, though. Everyone knows what the character's shtick is, but I think that in order to sort of bring this new incarnation of Batman out more and to get audiences behind it and the new take on it following the Nolan films, I do think you need a greater focus on Batman. So I'm not that fussed on it because I still think that Superman's going to get a decent amount of time. My biggest concern with the movie is all the other characters that are rumoured to be in it. Like, we've heard rumours of Doomsday's going to be the villain, and then they're going to bring Aquaman and the Flash and Wonder Woman. And I think that if it goes like that route, it's going to turn out to be like a Spider-Man 3 or Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's just going to be too many cooks and it'll just get crowded. But in terms of Batman getting more screen time than Superman, I'm not particularly fussed about that. But then again, I am kind of biased because Batman is my favourite superhero of all time, so...
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really going to moan because obviously I prefer Batman to Superman. I think when he sort of said it all recently, I think he kind of said one of the reasons we're focusing on Batman is because this is a different take to the Dark Knight trilogy. So I think they're probably going to straight away go off and not explain to the audience, but they're going to probably show how this is a different universe because there's a lot of neutrals that probably think this is a continuation of the Dark Knight Rises. So it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out, but I'm not really bothered, to be fair. I mean, I've said before, I'm not the biggest fan of Superman. I don't like his stuff. I think I think although there's more Batman, I don't think it's going to be like 80-20 Batman Superman. I think it'll be like a 60-40 or something, or a 50-50. But it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out. I think 'cause there's rumors, that Batman's going to be the face of um, the DC universe, probably the Tony Stark of it all. So I've got nothing against that, and I think Ben Affleck's going to absolutely nail it.
And I don't know if you've read many sort of Batman v Superman stories before in the comics or like followed any sort of character arcs like that. Batman is the one who keeps Superman in check. Like I think Superman hands Bruce in one incarnation like a stick of kryptonite and says, "If I ever turn bad or ever get out of hand, then you've got to be the one to stop me." So I think that you do need to set up Batman as this higher up as the two founding members of the Justice League. So I think that's completely fine with what they're doing. And then we'll move on to our last bit of news before we touch on two really short trailers after this. Star Wars Episode 8 is going to begin filming in Ireland this month. Makes complete and utter sense. They want to get things filmed and in pre-production right now. You may as well strike while the iron's hot. It is very early because Episode 7 still hasn't come out yet. We're still a few months away from that, and then Rogue One's coming out the following year. This doesn't come out until the May. But then again, when you think about it, that's not all that long, particularly to wait, is it, between Rogue One and Episode 8? So it makes sense that they're going to start filming now. I also know that the island itself is very secluded and is sort of preserved in terms of like wildlife and the actual like environment that it's on. So I don't know how easy or difficult it is to get access to that place to film. But it's very exciting, especially as a Star Wars fan, because already they're filming Episode 8 stuff. It just makes this whole thing seem so much more real.
Yeah, and to me, it's incredible that we've got, you know, five, maybe six Star Wars films in production, like as we speak.
Hmm.
One of them in post production, two of them officially filming, one of them being written on a second draft, and the other one, obviously the Boba Fett one, was Josh Tranks. That's still in production some way or another. So it's still incredible. But speaking of the release date gap, there's 5 months between Rogue One and Episode 8. And the way I'm seeing it, that's like what July was to December. It's nothing. I mean,
Hmm.
we've just entered September 2 months ago. The Star Wars hype was absolutely mental, and the fact we've waited it'll be 3 years since it's been announced after it comes out. And then we're there, we've had a long 3 year wait for The Force Awakens. Then it's going to be 1 year, 5 months, 1 year, and it's going to be absolutely incredible. I just still can't really get over that there's more than one in production at the same time. I think it's outstanding. I mean, there's only been 6 films before, but it was that 3 year cycle, and I was too young to
Yeah.
kind of acknowledge. When Star Wars came out, there was a trailer, then it came out soon. Nowadays, it's everything about it. And, I was reading online some of the security for the stunt doubles at the airport. The stunt doubles were taken in a cab of security to the set. They were then put onto the set. They were given excerpts of the script. They weren't allowed to see the dialogue. They weren't allowed to see anything else. They had some of the tightest security I've ever seen. They weren't allowed to question. Apparently, an alarm would go off if the scripts weren't handed in. They'd have 60 security guards checking everyone on the way out. The security was incredible. I mean, this came out in about May, but I just saw the article the other day, and it was Adam Driver's stunt double that was saying, I can't say a word because it's absolutely incredible, like how secure it is. Each script was numbered and tagged, and it's just insane. But you know what? There's been no spoilers. There are spoilers on everything else. You might find some on the corner of the internet, but Avengers, you knew who was going to go. You knew
Hmm.
what was going to happen. Civil War, obviously that's the downside of comics. You know the source materials, but we know nothing about Episode 7 still. We can put maybe we say the opening third of the film, that could be the opening 15 minutes of the film, all this merchandise stuff. Obviously with the lightsaber battle that probably come at the end, but it's just, to me, it's insane that we're getting it. And the fact they're filming Episode 8 now is just weird.
Yeah, definitely. And it's still surreal. Like, imagine like in a few years' time, we're still going to be talking about like Star Wars is in production, like the Han Solo one's going into production. It's really sort of strange that we're getting used to now a world like a movie world where Star Wars is always going to be around for like the next foreseeable future. And like with even with the prequels, as you said, like they came out on like a 3 to 4 year cycle, didn't they? So it was very much sort of okay. Now this new one's being filmed, it's released. New one's being filmed, released, and then we've had nothing. Like Star Wars has always been around. Star Wars will always be around, but it's really surreal that we're getting all these films, and it'd be very similar if it was just episode 7, 8, and 9 coming out, but the fact that we're getting spin-offs in between, it's really exciting, and I think it's definitely going to expand the Star Wars world. So it's really, as I always keep saying, it's really exciting to be a Star Wars fan. So definitely a huge buy that they're starting episode 8 filming. Now we're going to get onto two really, really quick trailers before we get into our main review of Legend today. The first trailer is the new Jake Gyllenhaal movie called Demolition, which I hadn't even heard about, to be honest. You mentioned that the trailer had come out. I watched it before we started recording. It's from the director of the Dallas Buyers Club. It's a film also a film that I haven't seen, but I've heard immense things from it. I've heard it's meant to be really, really good. So the plot basically looks like Jake Gyllenhaal. I can't remember his character's name in it. His wife dies in a car accident, and then the film's really sort of him dealing with it, like dealing with his own life, and it almost looks like he's freed after she's died. Like when he was like locked in a whole marriage thing, it seemed like he couldn't be free or do whatever he wanted to do. So, although he loved her and he misses her greatly, it's like him sort of dealing with it and sort of well, you see him literally like demolishing the house or like breaking things apart in the house, like he's sort of letting go from that and moving on. And I think that's pretty much what the film's going to be about. As a trailer, it hasn't really got me excited. These, to be honest, really aren't my kind of films. I don't know whether it's going for an Oscar or anything like that. In fact, I don't think this probably comes out till next year. I don't believe this is coming out this year, to my knowledge. Um, I mean, it looks okay. It just looks like your typical sort of family drama, and it's not really my kind of movie, to be honest.
Yeah, I think what it was with this, everyone was hyping it for ages. Oh, there's a film called Demolition coming out soon with Jake Gyllenhaal. Then it came out last week. Oh, there's a trailer out. Every single thumbnail was Jake Gyllenhaal with a sledgehammer in a house. To me, I see that. I think, oh my god, this is going to be, some next level Nightcrawler shit going on here.
Yeah.
And then I saw the trailer before we started. I was like, oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. I mean, it might be good, but my thing from seeing Jake Gyllenhaal with a sledgehammer being a crazy guy is now kind of dropped. It might be good, but it's got an April release date. To me, that indicates it's way too early to have Oscars and stuff. I know it's
Mm.
premiered at Toronto, but this week, but you know, it's not my cup of tea. And I know that sounds like a bad thing, so I haven't seen it. Maybe I'll see it, but my sort of the hype of everyone on Twitter, whether or not it happened to them, I don't like the fact they've gone from him with a sledgehammer, which showed about 5 seconds of the trailer. Should have shown more of the drama stuff because that's what it is. It's a household drama. It might be good. It looks a bit snappy at times with the one-liners, but it's going to be one of them where Jake Gyllenhaal wise, I'm looking forward to Everest more.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you see, I hadn't seen the poster, but I could totally see that if you see that picture of him with a sledgehammer, you're like, oh, we're getting into like some John Wick or like The Shining territory with this film, and then that's really not how it turns out. I said this before recording, but the only film that deserves Demolition in the title is Stallone's Demolition Man. Um, as I say, like I'm exactly the same. I'm bored with you here. It's not my cup of tea. These kind of drama movies. I'm sure it might be a good film, and I may check it out, but it's not one I'm going to rush out to the cinema for. And none of these kind of films really are ones that I have to simply be at the cinema to watch them. They're not that cinematic to watch. You could just easily watch them on Netflix or something like that once they've been released. And then our last bit of news to round out our news section before we get onto our review. Really, really quickly, there's been like a really short, 13-second long clip of the Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies extended edition. One of the extended shots, I mentioned this last week, is going to be Bard running over the rooftops away from Smaug. It's going to be a bit more action, bit more destruction at Lake Town. What I think it's taken from is that I think in the extended cut he's going to make a run for the Wind Lance, which was the device that usually shoots the black arrows at dragons, and I think Smaug's going to destroy that, which is going to explain why in the movie he doesn't even bother running towards that and just sort of perches in a tower. All the clip shows is him running over the rooftops. Smaug swoops low and tries to catch him and destroys the top of the roof, and then Bard sort of like falls off the roof and just clings on with an arrow before he falls off the roof. Really, really short, but it looks pretty cool. I do think that that action scene could do with a little extending, and it will explain why all of a sudden, like in the theatrical cut movie, like the wind lance was just dropped as like a plot device when it was set up so heavily. So I do think it's a necessary inclusion in the movie.
Yeah, I know I'm not the biggest Hobbit fan, so it's hard for me to go off a 13-second trailer. I know you're into it a lot more, but the way I'm saying it is that oh no, it's longer. And the thing
Yeah.
is, the thing I said it before. I like Smaug in it, and before I saw the third, and I hadn't read the book. I've obviously read it since I've seen all three. I was a bit pissed off. I knew he wasn't going to be in it for long, but I thought I would have rather seen 10-15 minutes more of the opening scene, take that off the final battle, because that was taking the piss, to be fair. But
Oh yeah.
it'll be interesting whether I see the extendeds. Maybe if I'm hammered one day and I download them, because I won't be buying them or something like that. I don't know, but you know, if there's going to be more extended stuff on the opening, which there clearly is, then great. But to me, it's kind of like, oh, The Hobbit.
The Hobbit extended edition so far, there are some good scenes in them, but inherently, if you're going to sort of like review them overall as an extended edition, I pretty much stick with the theatricals, to be honest. Even the theatricals feel like an extended version to me half the time. They're not like the Lord of the Rings, where all of the inclusions. I think Return of the King had like an hour put back into it, and every single one of those minutes was completely necessary and really fleshed the movie out. But I do think out of all the extended editions, I think Battle of the Five Armies is going to be the one that benefits greatly from the inclusion of new scenes. As I said last week, I follow the release and sort of rumours and speculation around the extended scenes from all the releases really closely, so I am looking forward to this one from some of the new things that are going to be in it. I do think a lot of the actual core plot was purposely cut out of the theatrical movie, though, to make way for the extended edition, like what happened to the Arkenstone, like what happened to the characters afterwards, and like the gold being divided up between all the factions. Like the core story was actually cut out of the movie, I think, and but I think this is going to put it all back in, and it'll feel more cohesive overall. But anyway, I don't want to speak too long. It's only 13-second clip, and I believe that it says that for digital download at the end of this trailer, it comes out on October 20th, and then the actual DVD release of the extended edition comes out in mid-November. I think it's like November 13th or somewhere around then. So we've still got a while yet to wait for that. But that's basically the news. I know that we've gone quite a long time on the news this week. It's surprising, but there was quite a lot of little bits of news to get onto. Now we're going to get onto our main review today, which is going to be the recent Tom Hardy film Legend crime thriller, directed by Brian Helgeland, starring Tom Hardy, Emily Browning, and Christopher Eccleston, as well as many other actors and supporting cast. We're going to go into spoiler free first, and then we'll let you know when we move into spoilers. I think this one, more than any other review we've done before, is going to be quite difficult to speak without spoilers, actually, because it is inherently a biographical film, and based on the lives of the Krays and everything like that. So yeah, let's jump straight into our review for Legend then.
London in the 1960s. Everyone had a story about the Krays. They were twins.
Do you think we look alike?
Reggie was a gangster prince of the East End. Ron Kray was a one-man mob.
Your brother is violent, paranoid schizophrenic. What I'm trying to tell you is that he's off his rocker.
Wow, no.
It was time for the Krays to enter gangster legend.
London is going to be the Las Vegas of Europe. We need someone to front and someone to muscle. Salud, come to Philadelphia.
Is she a nice
Girl, we'll get it for you.
I prefer boys. Italians. Sometimes Greek, but I am not prejudiced.
You got some balls to admit that, kid.
So going into it, I only watched one trailer sort of like a month before it came out. I really wasn't following the release of this movie that closely. I knew that Tom Hardy was going to be playing both of the Kray brothers, and obviously the Kray brothers, infamous gangsters from London during the 60s. And then I saw the trailer, and I was actually kind of put off by the movie because it did look very comedic. It looked sort of tongue-in-cheek, dark comedy. and I thought this isn't the movie I want to see when I see that Tom Hardy's playing the craze. I want it violent, I want it dark, I want it like a proper gangster crime film. Just absolutely brutal and stark to watch. And when I saw the trailer and it looked very much like it was played for laughs, I went like, oh, okay, this isn't really what I imagined it to be. Um, but then when I saw the movie, and I've actually seen the movie twice, I went to see it on Friday night and I went to see it last night as well on Sunday. Each time, packed house, everyone seemed like they were loving it, and even we'll get onto tone later on, but this was an example where when I actually sat down and watched it, I thought the comedy is very necessary to it, and I think it does sort of like give the film its own identity. I think if it had have been all out serious, then it would have been a very, very different kind of movie, and I don't know whether it would have been as enjoyable to watch. I think it definitely does have its moments where when it is violent and brutal, it really shines, but I think the comedy sort of elevates that more and gives the film its own identity more and makes it a really enjoyable watch.
Yeah, I think with Legend, I didn't know too much about the craze other than one of their presents. My dad, not really a fanatic, but because he's a Londoner, he knows a lot of the history, he's read a lot of the books. I remember when this got announced, it was on all over BBC.co.uk. Tom Hardy was playing both Cray twins, and there was that picture of him at the forefront with Ronnie in the background with the fag in his mouth, and that was almost straight away the iconic picture. I was like, wow, this is going to be incredible, and that was good, I think about a year ago, just over a year or something. So I followed it closely. When the first trailer came out, I was expecting this ultimate sort of gangster vibe, and then it was quite comedic, and I laughed a few times in the trailer, and I was there like, this is going to be very different to what I hoped for it. So I think going into the next set of trailers, it already adapted into my mind that this is going to be a very different telling to what I expect, and I think going into the film, I had that mindset, and it worked perfectly for me because I knew I was going in to watch Tom Hardy play both Cray twins. I wasn't going in to expect Goodfellas, which I originally wanted to, but I kind of got out of my mind, and I had a blast watching this film. I mean, I thought it was funny at times, it was brutal when it needed to be. Tom Hardy's fantastic. We'll go into all this in greater detail, but going into it, I'd adjusted my mindset and it worked perfectly. There are a lot of people, and I think it's the same of a lot of people giving it bad reviews. They're all there saying it's cartoonish. I didn't want this. Whereas if you look at the established critics, your Empires, your sort of Telegraph, stuff like that, the reason they're all giving it 4 and 5 stars is because they knew again that this wasn't going to be this dark Goodfellas vibe to it. As much as I personally would have wanted it, maybe them too. They knew, they appreciate it for what it is, and the way I see it, I told you after I saw it, I was like, it feels quite arty for this type of film, and the craze isn't exactly the easiest of films to do arty, but it works in this, and I had a great time, and it got the core elements right, because there's a lot could have gone wrong with it, but it didn't, and it worked, and I was grateful for that, and it was great fun.
Definitely, and I think you said before we started recording that so far it's only been released in the UK and Ireland at the minute. I think it comes out, is it October 2nd in the US and elsewhere. But as I said, like the 2 times I've seen it, it's been an absolute packed house. Now I know I've been to see it on a Friday and Sunday evening, so it's going to be naturally packed anyway. But I do think that audiences are interested in this, if not in the story of the craze, but I think that Tom Hardy was a huge draw for this movie, whether or not they've seen trailers before, whether they've only seen him on a poster and they wanted to go and see it. But so I do think it's going to make a lot, and it's going to be really interesting to see how much it makes just over here before it goes international with it. But I wanted to talk about the poster briefly, actually. I don't know if you saw this news, but I actually thought it was kind of genius. I'm not sure which reviewer it was. It may have been The Guardian.
Oh, yeah,
the poster is, it's I think it's the poster you were talking about. It's the 2 Cray twins, front and centre. And then, like most posters do, they give like all the star ratings that all the different publishers and reviewers have done. And in the middle, I think it's The Guardian. They gave it 2 out of 5 actually, which is really harshly low, I think, as a rating. But they acknowledged it on the poster, and it actually does say The Guardian 2 stars. But how they framed the characters and how they sort of front and center and all the writings behind it, it just looks like it's naturally part of like a 4 or 5 star review. I thought that was absolutely brilliant how they've done that. I don't think I've ever seen that on a poster before. I thought that was genius. But I mean, we've already talked about the plot before. The plot itself is very simple. It's a film that focuses on the life of Reggie and Ronnie Cray, who were two very, very infamous gangsters in London, and they sort of like controlled the London gangster underworld during the 60s. And it pretty much just goes throughout their life, to be honest. It starts off when they're gangsters, and then ultimately, like most films of this genre go, it shows the downfall of them, when relationships break apart, when people who are sort of like on their side are killed and the whole operation goes to part. That's basically the plot, really. But now we can get in more in depth, and I think that the main person you have to talk about if you're going to review this movie is Tom Hardy himself. I think out of all of Tom Hardy's previous roles, the one that's probably closest to this is his portrayal of Bronson. I think that movie itself as well, that was also a film that could have been played very straight, very serious, but that film is very comedic in parts, and I think that tonally this film's probably the most similar to that in style, and I think that Bronson works for that, and I think that this Legend works for that as well. But Tom Hardy in this film is absolutely incredible, and I would really, really genuinely like to see him get nominated for an Oscar with this. I don't know if he will, because I know he's up against a lot of other contenders this year, and like with Eddie Redmayne, and hopefully maybe DiCaprio as well for The Revenant, or whatever else is coming out. But I think that the fact that he plays both of these brothers so inherently differently is just testament to his acting style. And one of my concerns going in was like, both of these brothers, obviously they're identical twins. I was like, I am not going to be able to tell these people apart. I'm going to get confused all the way through the film which brother it's focusing on. But it's not just an appearance thing. For the character of Ronnie, he's in glasses, and but he has like a different way of speaking. He speaks very much with like a pronounced bottom lip, like he sticks his bottom lip out. He seems to speak a lot more posher than Reggie does, and I loved that he brought like a different portrayal of these characters, and immediately like you see them both on screen together, and you immediately know which brother's which. Both have clear different personalities. Ronnie is mentally insane, and he's like really highly strung, and he can just snap, and he's violent, whereas Reggie's the more collected one of the two, I would say, although he definitely gets his moments of violence in the movie. Tom Hardy was fantastic in this movie, and honestly, if I'm thinking about it, it is probably my favourite acting role I've ever seen Tom Hardy in. It would be between this or Bronson, but on second viewing, I think that because he plays two very different characters, he skirts the line between funny and intimidating and scary. I think that his portrayal in this definitely takes it as my favourite thing I've ever seen Tom Hardy in.
Yep, and definitely based off that, I mean, going into it, I knew this would be Tom Hardy's film, and my main gist was, how am I going to watch this and not see Tom Hardy twice? And then it literally, all it takes is probably about 5 minutes until I see Ronnie Cray, I see Reggie Cray. And I'm still here sitting at home like, how? Like, I want to know how he does it, because obviously we will find out in the featurette. But it's just so incredible, and obviously I'm no actor. I can imagine it being so hard. They have to get into a role, especially on the sort of biopic of the most notorious gangsters in British history. Imagine getting into a role of one person, but then he's got to do both of them, and they're the two main ones. It must have been one of the hardest challenges he's done in his career, but ultimately this is the one that's going to pay off, and I'm really, really praying. I don't know what kind of Oscar it could be, a nomination. Would it be, lead actor, potentially, if it was to be nominated, or would it be a supporting actor? But the one thing I'm saying, I'm 300% confident he will get a nomination this year. Even if it's not Legend, he is the second guy in The Revenant. Everyone's forgetting that. I know that he's going to steal that film because he's great in everything. That Child 44 that came out this year, I haven't seen it. Everyone said Tom Hardy's good in it though. And he's the actor. He comes into a film. To me, he didn't steal Inception, but that was his breakthrough to the kind of world rather than himself. I remember him stealing that. He was the funny, smart-ass one. Brilliant in it. Most memorable line of Inception's him. Then you can look at Bronson. That was the first Tom Hardy film I saw. Intimidating, brilliant. There was one scene actually in Legend that's very similar to Bronson, the shut up you cunt sort of stuff. That I was in tears at some of it, but
there's plenty of that in this movie as well.
Oh yeah, this is the British. I mean, Americans always pick up on how much we swear more as a nation. This is the Cockney swearing, which has always been on a different level, I've always thought, but it's one of them where I was still shocked when I came out that Tom Hardy was so good. There's, I can't really say a lot of bad things about him in it. The only one thing is that with Ronnie, very, very gradually he slips into Bane. But the thing is, he might slip into Bane, but I've seen interviews with Reggie Cray. I've never seen Ronnie Cray speak in them before, so for all I know, Ronnie Cray might have had that voice because he was declared mentally insane, and the kind of treatment blew up his jaw, and that's what you can see in this film at times, which is great. I mean, he could have played himself twice, but he didn't. He went for two different roles, and there's so much credit to having it, and it's such a hard feat though. But the Crays, when you think of British gangsters, that's the only one you ever think of. Peaky Blinders has hit mainstream. Tom Hardy, he's in that as well. But this is the definitive. There was the 1990s one. They had Gary and Martin Kent from Spandau Ballet. The story I got from that was that it's meant to be alright, very cheesy, very 80s-ish. Apparently in real life, the Crays are both alive. They rang up the Moor, started bollocking them, saying how shit it was, saying how they've disgraced them and stuff. I mean, could you imagine getting that phone call? But I bet if they saw this, they'd be like, wow. I mean, obviously I don't really know that, but it's one of the films that this is going to be the iconic role. I mean, I was looking the other day after, I kind of put a list up of every Tom Hardy film I've seen and how I'd grade him and the film itself. And then I just had to put this at number one because he's so good. It is Tom Hardy's film. I know he's the craze, but you come out of it thinking, oh my god, he's done it. And I know I'm kind of venting the same thing, but it's true because it's such an incredible feat. And I really hope, I guarantee you he'll 200% be nominated for a BAFTA for this, whether or not they can make it to the American, because it's quite early in Oscar season and some critics don't like this. We'll go into it more, but I didn't have a clue what these critics are on about. I said it early going into it. They all wanted Goodfellas, so did I, but I got over that 6 months ago and I saw this, and this works.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up Goodfellas as well later on, because I do think there are, in elements of this film, definitely some similarities to some Scorsese films. But you were talking about Ronnie Cray with the treatment made his lip and his jaw inflate. You see, I didn't know that at all. You know a lot more about the Crays than I did. I knew that they were notorious gangsters of London, and that was pretty much all I knew, to be honest, going into this movie. And I know that, and you can get into this later if you want, but there are a lot of inaccuracies or things that were glossed over in this film. That's probably just a case that they're trying to make it an interesting film before they make it 100% accurate to what actually happened during the time. But with this film, I would love to see Tom Hardy get nominated for an Oscar, but to me it seems like one of those films, unfortunately, that won't get looked at the Oscars purely based on the material that's in it. I know that obviously at the Oscars sometimes there's been violent material and stuff that's been praised, but it was the case of Wolf of Wall Street as well with Scorsese. I thought that was one of the best movies of that year, and it really didn't get a look in at all, to be honest. So I think that the material in it is going to set this one back. But we've talked how good Tom Hardy is as well, but I mean the supporting cast in this movie is also just on a whole other level. For example, the second lead really is Emily Browning playing Reggie's wife, Frances Shay, or she. I don't really know how to pronounce the surname, but Emily Browning was just fantastic in this movie. I thought the only other two films I've seen her in were Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events when she was much younger, and then Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch, which I thought was a terrible, god-awful movie. I don't blame her in it at all. The story and the plot itself were inherently weak, and she was doing the best as what she can. And then when I saw her in the trailer for this film, I was like, oh god, she's doing a really awful Dick Van Dyke Cockney apples and pears impression. I was like, oh, this is going to be painful to watch. But honestly, in the film, I think she is American, isn't she, Emily Browning? She's Australian, sorry. But you believe that she is I thought she was absolutely brilliant in this movie. She has a lot of range in it. She has the emotional moments, or as all these sort of gangster movies start off, where everything's all happy, lovey-dovey, and then as the film escalates, things get dark, things get dramatic, and then ultimately what leads up to the ending. But I thought she was great, and she was a really sort of good emotional character which tried to keep Reggie on the path, and then she has some really nice interactions with Ronnie as well. So I would definitely, I don't think she'll get a nomination, unfortunately, but I do think that she was great in this movie. And then you look at some of the other supporting cast as well. Like, I didn't know that David Thewlis was going to be in this movie. He's one of my favourite actors. He's great in everything I see him in. He's also going to be in Macbeth later on in this year as King Duncan, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then there's just some other little side characters as well. There's like so many to mention, but there's like Taron Egerton, who played Eggsy in Kingsman. There's Paul Bettany gets a cameo in the film as well. There's so many to mention, but I think that even actors that I weren't aware of in other stuff, I think that every single person played their character perfectly. And to be honest, I don't think there was a single flat performance in this entire film, to be honest.
Yeah, and the whole thing's great. I mean, we're there talking about Tom Hardy, but you're right. It's so easy to forget how good everyone else is. I mean, Emily Browning, I'd admit the only thing I've seen her in is Lemony Snicket. That was 10 years ago. I can't really compare it. You know, she was a teenager then. And then it's when she gets the sort of Eastern accent right. I know it's easy to do, but it's very easy. Elijah Wood can explain how poor a Cockney accent can be. So not Elijah Wood, Charlie Hunnam. And I thought she was great in it. I don't know an awful lot about Frances. I know in the general gist of things that the film focuses on maybe 2-3 years of the Craze story, which is one of the minor criticisms I'll go into a lot later on because it borderlines on spoilers, but I thought she's great. It makes not an interesting change, but it's one of them where, okay, we've got the Craze, we've got their gangsters, but I want to see that human side of them where, you know, they treat them with class, stuff like that. There's something which is a very bad inaccuracy I'll go into later because that's a key part of the film. But I thought Emily Browning was great. I thought the family were. They've got that sort of aspect right where the mom and the family always despised the Craze, although the son did work with them at one point. And there's so much. I mean, David Thewlis, I haven't seen him in an awful lot, but whenever he's in stuff, look at stuff like Boy in the Striped Pajamas, he's great in that. It's very strange. It's one of them performances that you always forget about, but when you think about it, it's so good. Then you've got him in Harry Potter. I loved him in Harry Potter. It was such a shame to see Lupin die in it. And I'm very looking forward to Macbeth. We spoke about this before, but you know, this is not really his comeback, but it's nice to see him in the limelight, and especially with, you know, two films that are going to be talked about a lot. I think people underestimate how much money Macbeth is going to make, but it's great to see that. And Taron Egerton, I mean, Kingsman's my second best film of the year so far, and he was new. That was one of his first films. I think he had a second film out that month called Testament of Youth. Now he's in Legend. I thought he was great. I've forgotten the name of the person he played. I think it was
Teddy, isn't it?
That's the one.
In this movie?
Yeah, Mad Teddy Smith. Very important to the Craze story. He's great in it. You see him in the trailer laughing, and I think he's got a massive career ahead of him now. I mean, he's going to be in an Oscar bait film coming out at the end of next year, I've heard. So that's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. But the supporting cast was outstanding, even if it's the cameos. I mean, Christopher Eccleston, he's the old doctor. Christopher Eccleston, he's brilliant. He's the copper taking him down, and it's just, this cast is incredible. And I can talk about the director. I don't really want to say it in a nasty way, but you know, Brian Helgeland, he hasn't directed an awful lot, and it's very mixed. But his writing, there's no doubt that he's a very good writer, and I think it works in this film that there is no poor dialogue. It's very nifty to the sort of Craze, if you know what I mean. Where when I was kind of watching it, the one-liners of comedy work, but they're not afraid to be brutal, and it's not this pathetic love story, which it's so easy for crimes to fall into that love triangle stuff. But it works perfect, and I like the whole thing works. But I think if I'm going to look at the year so far, this is probably the best cast I've seen in a film.
Yeah, and I'll completely agree with that as well. And I'm glad that you brought up Christopher Eccleston as well. I forgot to mention him the first time. I didn't know he was going to be in the movie, so when this isn't a spoiler, but it starts off in the street and you see him in a cop car. I was like, oh great, Christopher Eccleston's in this, and he doesn't get a whole lot to do in the film really. He sort of like crops up every now and then in the film, but it was nice to see him back in something again. And you're right with like Brian Helgeland. I think he is more of a writer than a director. I don't know, as you said, he's directed projects before, but for example, like he's written LA Confidential, which is one of my favourite films. I saw that fairly recently again, and I absolutely adore that movie. I don't know whether this is as sharply written as that movie was, perhaps, but I still think that the writing is great on this side, and that's just, you know, brought more to the forefront with the great cast and the acting in the film. We'll move away from the casting now if you want, and we'll sort of get onto like the more core ingredients of the movie, so like the tone and the violence and stuff like that. As I said, like going in, I thought it was just going to be like straight up comedy, and they were going to very much sort of only touch on the gangster and violent side, if they'd even keep the violence at all. And then I saw that the certificate was 18, and I was like, okay, they're gonna keep some of the more violent stuff in there, and I'm so glad they did, because I think that the film itself does focus very much on the relationship between Reggie and Francis, and they could have very easily have just like made the entire film that focus and kept all the gangster stuff to the background, or not shown the violence as perhaps as hard hitting as it should be. But when you see the movie, this film gets incredibly violent, and there's a scene I'll talk about in the spoilers, which is probably one of the most hardest, I won't say hardest scene to watch I've ever seen in the film, but it's definitely one that just makes you go like, oh shit, like that just happened. um but I do think that the violence was completely necessary in it. I mean, these are the most notorious gangsters to ever come out of London, so you've got to show this side to them, and I'm glad that they did, and I think that they pulled it off really well. As I said, although it does get very funny, and there's even there's like, this isn't a spoiler, there's a torture scene that goes on in one bit of the film, but even during that, it's still sort of played for laughs, and the writing's very comedic, and I guess this is where I can sort of bring in where I sort of like saw Scorsese references. The biggest one I really saw was sort of like Wolf of Wall Street, and even in that, when that gets dark, or when it's like touching on sort of hard hitting details and stuff like that, it is still very much played for laughs, or they'll have like a snappy one liner in there. So it really reminded me of that. And also in tone towards the start, there's a fantastic one shot in the movie where Reggie is going on his first date with Francis, and it's sort of it's all done in one shot. They enter the club, and he's sort of like chatting with all the people and like catching up with them, and the camera follows them all the way into the bar. They sit down, and then Reggie's called into like a side room because he needs to take care of some business. The camera follows him into there, and then it follows him all the way back to the table, and it's about like I would say a well over 5 minute shot, to be honest, and it's all done in one take, and I love shots like that. And it was that scene that really reminded me of that great one shot in Goodfellas as well. And I think that scene sort of plays out the same as well. Like they're entering a club, they're like chatting with everyone, they're schmoozing with everyone. The camera follows them all the way through the club, in the nightclub. So I think that the scene to that, it really did remind me of that scene from Goodfellas actually. And like as I said, like with the sort of plot details and the thing about like, you know, a crime thriller, their rise to fame, everything's great at the start, they're on top of the world, and then by the end of the film it all starts to fall apart, and then all the characters find themselves in a really dark place. That's like in Scarface, in Goodfellas, Casino, even in like Wolf of Wall Street. So there's a lot of Scorsese movies as well as, like, as I said, like Scarface, stuff like that. I do think it very much follows that, and I don't know whether that's just like because inherently with these crime thriller films, or like as this is based on a real life, they never go well in the end, and it's always interesting. I always love these kind of films, even though they're the same stories, because it is interesting to see how it does all fall apart, and I think that's, you know, that's very, very evident in this film without giving anything away.
Yeah, and I think one of my only slight criticisms of the film is that when I wanted to see this biopic, I know this is kind of me, but I think a lot of people in honesty like this too, I thought this would show the Krays, their rise to power. I mean, it kind of starts off with just exactly like the trailer. You know, the voice of Francis goes, "Oh yeah, there was always a story about the Krays," and all that stupid accent stuff. That was a terrible London accent, by the way. But it's like it literally starts off with them in the car, like the trailer. And I was a bit like, oh, but it's like fair enough. Like it works still, but I think with the Krays, I keep saying I want to see so much more. It's true, and I know it wouldn't fit into a runtime. Would it have worked as a Netflix TV series? Probably better, yes. But I'm so happy with what we got. I'm actually very now aware I've just had a Netflix show, and I really want one with Tom Hardy playing both. But yeah, no, that's my only slight criticism. Is just there's so much in their story, and I suppose that's what the problems of when you've got, you know, real life gangsters with these reputations. You can't put everything into it, but I just thought the sort of rise to power was one of the fundamental ones, talking about Goodfellas, talking about Scarface. It shows the rise, the middle, and the end, and this is more or less the middle and end of it. But you know, I still had a great time watching it.
Oh, definitely. And before I go into overall opinions, I just want to bring up like two other actors that are in it. The one who played Francis's mum. If any of you are Game of Thrones fans out there, she's played by she plays the character of Selyse Baratheon in Game of Thrones, which is Stannis' wife. So it was fun to see her
Does
in
she?
there. Yeah, yeah. And
Well, she's dead now.
yeah, that's true. She's not dead in the books, but that's a whole other thing. And then the guy who played Francis's brother, I kept looking at him and I was like, I know I've seen you from somewhere.
Oh, it's Merlin.
Yeah, I've just checked now. It's Merlin. But when I was watching him, I was like, he looks so familiar to like the guy who plays Beast in First Class and Days of Future Past, and in Mad Max. What's his name? Nicholas Hoult, is it?
Yeah.
It looked a lot like him, and I kept thinking it was him. But I've just checked now. Yeah, it was from the TV show Merlin. So as I said, like great supporting cast. We'll go into overall opinions now before we hit on a couple of spoilers. Overall, if you haven't got this impression already, I think it's an absolutely fantastic film. It's definitely probably my top three favourites of the year so far. I know there's been some great ones, but I've seen this twice now, and it was equally, if not better, on the second viewing than it was the first viewing. One of the best ensemble casts I've ever seen in a movie. It's Tom Hardy's best performance, I would say, just down to the fact that he plays both of the brothers so differently. Emily Browning's great as well. I know she hasn't done much, but I definitely hope that this is more of a not a breakout role for her, but I hope she gets more recognition from this one than she has done in other projects. The music as well, I think the direction's great, the script's fantastic. Um, if I was going to give a criticism to it, I know a lot of people might be turned off with sort of like the flip flop in between comedy and seriousness, but to me that wasn't a problem. I love films like that, and I think that if they can do it well and you laugh at the funny bits and you're shocked at the shocking bits, then I think the film does a great job of skirting between the two tones. If I was going to bring up a negative against the film, though, I think that perhaps it was about 10 to 15 minutes too long. I think that towards the end of the film it does start to slow down a lot, and I'm trying to think though now, and I'm trying to think of any scenes that I could have cut out, and because that the film's so tightly made with the scenes, I don't think you could take anything out of it. But I think it stands at about 2 hours 10 minutes or a little over that, and I think it may have benefited to get it like bang on 2 hours or something like that. It's not a problem. I still love the film, but I do think that the pacing towards the end does slow right down. But overall, it's one of my favourites of the year. Absolutely fantastic, and it's going to be hard for Tom Hardy to ever top this performance, I think, but I'm sure he will give it a few years.
Yeah, and my thoughts is this is one of the standout films of the year so far. It's great. It's everything you want from a gangster film, in all honesty. You're going to have a great time. You're going to be mesmerised by Tom Hardy on the screen, and you're going to come out of it, you're going to want to see more, and you're going to hope he gets some nominations coming Oscar season. I really do believe he will. But it's one of them films where, you talk about classics, people are going to be talking about this for a good 10 years, aren't they? When you bring up Tom Hardy, people bring up Bronson, they bring up Bane, these classic performances, that they're all going to be replaced. Not everyone's going to talk about him playing the Cray Twins.
Me and my brother, we're gonna rule London.
You could go straight.
Life isn't always the way we want it to be.
Things are getting completely out of control, and the American mafia may also be involved.
What exactly are you doing about it?
We're going after the Krays.
You won't mind if I fight back, will you?
Crime is a business. You don't want a war.
I do, actually.
Listen to yourself, you're nuts!
So that was our spoiler-free section. If you've seen Legend, obviously stick around for our spoiler section. If you want to see Legend and you haven't, then sort of like switch off now, come back to us, because we're going to be spoiling the hell out of this movie now. We're going to be getting into certain scenes that we couldn't talk about but they are so ingrained into the plot. It was very difficult actually doing a spoiler-free section with this movie, certainly as it is a biographical piece. But we'll hit on a few plot points now. We'll kick off with the shooting scene actually towards the end, where Ronnie Cray is paid, I think it's £2,000 to go and kill a guy because he's meant to be protecting this guy at a factory, isn't it? It's all like sort of knit into like the whole gangster thing, and he just walks into the bar and just walks to the back, shoots him in the head, and walks out, and that's really sort of one of the pegs to the beginning of the end of this story as it all unravels towards the end. I know that obviously did actually happen. I'm forgetting the name of the pub now, but it was like really, really infamous, wasn't it, that incident? When I think he says in the movie as well, it was all on the radio, and you see, it's one of my favourite scenes in the film actually. Straight after that, it's where Ronnie goes back to his home, to his mum's. He's just sipping like a cup of tea, eating some cake, and then Reggie comes in and he's trying to cover it all up. He's saying like, burn the jacket, dump the gun in the river, bring the witnesses to me. Like I'll scare them, I'll shake them up so that they don't point you out when the police line you up with all other suspects. And it's that bit where he realizes that he is his brother and he can't, I think Francis as well says something like, tell the witness to point him out and get him sent down because he's a loose cannon. But it's that element of like brotherly love, and like no matter what they go through or what happens, they are still brothers at the end of it, and they always look out for each other. And I absolutely love that scene.
Yeah, and I think it was at the Blind Beggar pub.
That's
just
the one.
bit of the backstory is that it was George Cornell, who was part of the Richardson gang, which is the ones to get arrested. He was one of the last ones. He's supposedly the unstable one out of all of them. He was the one that was really escalating the war sort of stuff. So it was always inevitable that apparently he was going to get killed, especially with the others in prison as well. And I think that scene. It's kind of in one or two of the trailers. It's not spoiled, but you see him walking into the bar and pull a gun up at someone. Thing is, I didn't know who it was. I don't think many people did. Also, I think a lot of neutrals probably thought the craze would go around shooting loads of people on screen together. I don't really think that, but I just know a few people would do if they think it's a gangster film. But it was it's when he gets shot in the head, you kind of see the sort of circular hole appear, and then his eyes kind of widen, and he just drops back dead, and you're kind of there like, Jesus, like it's quite graphic, almost like a sort of graphic novel type, but it's the aftermath of that scene. It's just brilliant in sort of the acting point of view, where everyone knows something's happened, and they're at the mum's house, they're kind of on the sofa, Ronnie's just there like eating, drinking biscuits and stuff, and the mum's clearly in the know on what's happened, but she goes, you got to take care of him, it's your brother. And it's not really a powerful moment, but it's so crucial to the story of the twins themselves that the twin brothers, they will protect themselves no matter what. It doesn't matter how bad it is, they're gonna sort of go down together.
Yeah, and I didn't bring this up in the spoiler-free section, but one thing I love about, and it's like scenes like this in particular, is that there are moments where they do seem like genuinely nice people. Like you see the intro, you see Reggie walking down the street and he's like running errands, he's speaking to all his neighbours, he says like, oh, did you leave this on my mum's table? Oh yeah, she said to give it to you, you take care, like all that stuff. Like everyone loves them on the street, and I think that was a case in actual reality as well. I think everyone loved them, they loved the mum and the family and all that stuff. So it's a real shame. It's like scenes like this scenes where Ronnie's talking to Francis and he seems like a genuine, like a simple bloke, but like genuine, like wouldn't harm a fly. But that makes them all the more terrifying, that when you do realise that there is this horrible, horrific gangster side to them and what they do actually get up to. So it's always really interesting, but it's always like those scenes where you see them being human and with that side of humanity to them, and when you do show that offset with the violent side, it makes them all the more scary.
Oh yeah, precisely. And I think it's that tracking shot when it shows him going into the pub, and then it's next with Mad Jack the Hat, or whether it was when he just he just smacks him in the face there and then, and you kind of knew that something was going to happen, and then he just walks back out, apologises to Francis for having to do some business stuff for a minute or two, and you get that vibe, and it was like that in real life. I mean, these weren't just gangsters. These guys were famous in London. Everyone knew of them. They all liked them. And I was saying this off air, they're just someone that the intimidation is there always, but it's the gist. You always get a lot of these gangsters where they are family people. Everyone likes them. They're the little lads around the corners that have grown up and stuff. And that's what you get from the crazy one. I mean, one of the iconic pictures of the twins is them walking together in their suits, but it looks like they're kind of coming out sort of council flats area. And I think it might be the same place they actually do in the film where Francis lives. But it's one of them where, it's a tough one to get right, because you can make them proper gangsters, but then you've kind of left out a part of their story, or you can sort of, whitewash it so they're good boys, but then you're missing out another crucial part. And I think this film catches the both of them. There is one or two inaccuracies, I suppose we'll go into it in a minute. With Francis's death, she does kill herself in this, and leading up to it, there's a scene where she's trying to close a car up in the rain, and Reggie's treating like shit, and then when she's inside, he like kind of hits her and beats her up. Then it cuts, it's implied rape, or it's implied he just beat her up. But coming out of one that leads up to her, killing herself. But in reality, both families were spoken out since this film's come out, where there is not known Reggie did not beat her up at all ever. He was meant to be very not classy, but a dignified husband, as the sort of traditional gentleman type. They're saying he didn't beat her up, and Francis's family, who despised the craze, they've said the same, that he never laid a finger on her. So it's one of them where it's a bit of a shame they add in stuff like this, because this is that Hollywood aspect where after that you see why she kills herself, but in reality there was just so much more to it than the fake line that they do, which is a bit of a shame, but it doesn't take off the fact that the death's a pivotal part of the film.
Yeah, and to be honest, that scene with the implied rape and stuff, even then when I watched it the first time, it did seem very out of character, and like just sort of, it's like it's never really referred to again. Like you see her with a black eye and stuff like that, but it did seem very out of place in the rest of the film, I think. And I don't know whether it was done for shock value, especially now you say that they say that never happened, and even afterwards. Ronnie says that's when he sees a black eye. He says that's bang out of order. That's not the way we were brought up. So I completely believe that, and it does seem like a very Hollywood thing to do, and like the whole thing surrounding her suicide at the end where she overdoses, that did seem very Hollywood in its approach. Like I know that's probably exactly what happened, but I know that you were saying that there were rumors as well that she was like sort of assassinated, or she was like selected for like like by a hitman or something to like take care of her.
Yeah, I don't know it precisely, but there were very strong rumours. One of the cellmates of, I think it will be Reggie, said before that he wouldn't speak about anything till afterwards, because after Reggie died, the fear was obviously still there. What they were kind of implying was that he said there was talk that Reggie had her poisoned before she died. Whether or not this is just a guy in a cell saying this.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of lies, but he's also the guy that there was another big bit. It'll come back to me later on, but his cellmate, I think that's it now. There was some rumours that they had like incestuous relationships where it's kind of like, are you making this up, or he might be legit, but sums all up. He says up after they both die. Another thing I want to bring up is that we didn't really bring into the review that Ronnie Craig's gay, and they kind of it's openly in the trailer, but then in real life it was completely different. To that back then you couldn't come out and say you were gay. Okay, you can now, but in the '60s, especially London, some places it was illegal to be gay. And in the scene we're introduced to Ronnie when he's in the cabin in the woods. And that's because in real life, apparently, he was there for a few months or two when he kind of came out. They almost kept him locked away and stuff from people. So it's quite bizarre when you hear about some of these stories. But it's there's one or two things. Okay, we know he's gay, but was it really that open? I very much doubt it was.
And yeah, and that bit where he's in the caravan in the woods, that did cross my mind that maybe that's why he was there. But in the context of the movie, it's sort of like just made to show that Ronnie's bonkers and he just kind of has these ridiculous ideas. Like there's one of my favourite bits in the movie is where he's arguing with David Thewlis. He needs £50,000 to set up a utopian city in Nigeria called Utugu or something like that, and he's just going off on him because he needs the money. So when you see the movie and he's in the caravan, you just think, is this sort of like wacky, crazy guy who just randomly decided to live in the woods for a few days in a caravan? But now that you say that does make a lot of sense. And I think one of my mates is not massively knowledgeable on the craze, but he knows a bit more, and he said about the whole incestuous thing and the rumours of that they were both gay but they couldn't come out, so they used to be with themselves to like let those urges out and stuff like that. So I don't know how much of it's rumour, how much of it's true, but as you said, like this movie is sort of like the product of Hollywood. It definitely streamlines the narrative down more. It cuts a lot of stuff out, but I mean, I don't need a film to be massively 100% accurate. I mean, one of my favourite historical movies is Braveheart, and that's like 20% accurate, really. It's like only accurate in like characters' names only. So I don't think it's always a problem for a film, but I think if you are making a film that like this is the true story of the craze, and then you do take these liberties, I do think that that's quite an annoying, especially if people see this film and think they know everything about the craze, when really when you read up about it, they've definitely lost left a lot of material out. I think that is quite annoying, but I think it's we could have expected this, because this is like the trend of Hollywood doing a true story. It's very rarely you'll get a 100% accurate retelling of an event.
Yeah, and it's incredibly hard to get accurate sort of events too, because it doesn't matter what it is, there's always going to be inaccuracy, and it's just incredibly hard to get it right. And to translate a good 15 years into a 2-hour film is very tough too. And a few films can do it, fair enough, but it kind of worked as it is. I think, going to another spoiler, one of the most important parts of the film is what leads Reggie Cray into, eventually getting caught, which I'll talk about another, not really inaccuracy, something that's not really adjusted well on screen, but they, Jack the Hat McVitie is the guy that he punches twice, and he's going to get killed when he comes into the room at the end. Ronnie hired him to shoot Thingy Bob.
David Thewlis' character.
That's the one. I think it's something Payne, or basically their financial advisor.
I'm on it. Leslie Payne.
That's the one.
That's the one. Yep.
And he fails at doing so. Reggie's already angry at Ronnie. Then again, it's his brother, but it's also to the sense that Reggie would rather he be killed and nothing could be said about it. And then he kind of lays into Jack the Hat, and Jack the Hat's taunting him about Francis. And then he just goes mental with the knife, stabs him in the eye, stabs him about 20, 30 times. Everyone's horrified at this party. And that kind of is almost the finale to the film itself. And then when I was kind of looking, I was like, wow, this is one of the most brutal things I might have ever seen, because I'm used to sort of gun stuff. I've seen stuff like Band of Brothers, I've seen stuff like Saving Private Ryan that's brutal, but when you've seen the same guy get stabbed about 20, 30 times, it is very, very violent. And, the thing I want to sort of applaud is the fact that this did happen in real life, and I think the real life story is a bit different, as in he stabbed him just below the eye first, then he started going around the body and the neck, and they show a lot of it, and it's really tough to watch, because kind of had everyone it was absolutely full on Wednesday, never seen it fall for a film that's not a blockbuster before, and there was just this pure silence, there's no soundtrack, no nothing. And it's this kind of like, wow, that moment where it all happened, and it's like, Jesus Christ, and then it kind of obviously finishes after that pretty much.
Yeah, and that scene really, I mean, there's a few other scenes as well, but like that scene definitely earns it that 18 rating certificate. And this was the scene I was referring to earlier in the spoiler section, where you just kind of sit back and go like, holy shit, that just happened. I think why it's so shocking is because throughout the rest of the movie, there's a scene, and I'll get onto it in a minute, with where they're fighting with the rival gang in the pub, and it's very much played for laughs. It's very cartoon. It almost reminded me of like the church scene or something from Kingsman. It's like very over the top and stylized and funny. And then you'll get a scene like this where it is very sort of matter of fact, and like you're almost watching as an observer, like the people in that room, and it is incredibly shocking. It probably is one of the most brutal scenes I've ever seen in a film. Definitely in terms of like a stabbing scene. Like the only other one that comes to mind is, I don't know if you've seen the movie Zodiac. There's a scene in that movie where the killer sort of like ties a couple together, and then you just see him just like stabbing them, and it's almost like you're watching it actually happen. But this, as you said, he stabs him like about 30 times, like really frantic, animalistic, and it is genuinely really shocking. And the fact that you see it as well, it's like, it's really, really difficult to watch. And then that really is the nail in the coffin for the craze after that scene. Because when this guy, is it Jack the Hat McVitie, did you say he was?
Yeah.
When he tries to kill Leslie Payne, is unsuccessful in it. He's like the most useless like henchman they've got on the payroll. I don't know why they keep him there. But then when Leslie is in prison, obviously he knows that he was almost assassinated by the people he's employed by, so he divulges all the details to the police, like all names, locations, everything like that. So that's the nail in the coffin for the whole Cray operation. And really, to be honest, that was entirely down to Ronnie Cray, really, because he was the one who instigated the whole thing in the first place. But yeah, that scene was incredibly difficult to watch. So I guess from that, there's really not much more you can say for spoilers without just basically quoting the entire film. So, and I don't want to do that. I know if you're still listening to this, you've probably seen the movie already, but it is one you just kind of need to see and go with all the scenes in general. So now, before we close out the review, we'll just sort of go over a couple of our favourite scenes, or our one favourite scene if you like. So if you've got one in particular, George, do you want to give that first?
The favourite scene of mine has got to be when they fight each other in the club, and I'm quite sure everybody spoke about it, but it's just this brilliant moment, and it's this kind of sort of childlike turned brutal fight between the two brothers, and everyone's horrified, and then it's just so funny at the same time, where it kind of starts out as them like slapping each other, and it's just brilliant piece of making, and I really want to see a behind the scenes thing of how they filmed that, because I know he uses a stunt double and stuff, but you must have had to have like got it shot by shot perfectly matched up.
Definitely, yeah, and that's my favourite scene as well. I was going to say it was the one shot throughout the club, and that's definitely my favourite film shot, or I was going to pick the scene where both brothers are fighting, because that's hilarious as well. But I think, when I think back to the movie, that the bar fight is definitely my favourite, and like Ronnie says at the end, he wanted it to be like a Western. How it's set up at the start, it almost is like a Western. It's the classic scene like you'd get in a spaghetti Western film, where the gang's in there, a rival gang shows up, and the guy behind the bar just sort of like runs away and goes into the cellar because he says he's got to change the barrels. All the people in the bar just instantly leave and leave them to it. And this scene also has some of my favourite lines. It's like the rival gang's got like a little truncheon thing, and Ronnie's like, "What's that?" And he goes, "It's a tool." And he goes, "No, it's not. It's a fucking rolling pin. You're gonna bake me a cake with that thing." And it's hilarious. And then he just sort of storms out because he's really disappointed because he wanted a shootout, and they've bought like a little truncheon with them, so he just leaves. But you know that he's going to come back in, and he comes back in with 2 hammers, and then what ensues is just crazy, hyper-violent fisticuffs with Reggie with knuckle dusters on, and then Ronnie's got 2 hammers. He's just breaking people's kneecaps, smacking them in the face. And what I will say is, with like the sound in this film as well, you feel the impact from every punch, every whatever they're using, whether it's a hammer or whatever it is. You do kind of wince, but in that scene in particular, you are kind of cheering along with them, because at that point in the movie, as I said, it is very cartoony and over the top and, you know, hyper realistic, whereas later on in the film it does get dark when the tone changes. But yeah, final thoughts. I'm just going to reiterate what I've said. Legend, definitely a film you should check out. I hope it does well. It's a film that I think really deserves to do well, and obviously in October when that hits, you're going to get some more big heavy hitters. You've got Spectre coming out, so I definitely want to see this do well up until that point, and I think it will get number 1, at least I hope it does. I don't know. I don't think it's up against much in its release over here anyway. I know that America's going to get it a bit later than us, but it's definitely one you need to see. I would say see it on a big screen as well. It's not massively cinematic in its scope, but I do think that there are some scenes that need to be seen on the big screen, especially like the fight scenes like this. And it's just movies like this that need to make money. It's got fantastic performances all across the board from everyone. There's not a single dud performance. If you love crime thrillers, then you're going to absolutely adore it. If you're into like sort of like violence and stuff like that, the movie's definitely got it, but it also has a very witty, well-written script. It does have humane moments to it, and yeah, it's just one you need to check out. I've seen it twice already. I wouldn't mind seeing it a third time. It's definitely one of my favourites of the year.
Yeah, this is one of the funnest biopics I've seen in a long time, probably the best one I've seen since Rush. I think you'll have a great time watching it. It's got the violence on right, it's got the calm, the familiness, the home. It shows the good and the bad of both brothers. I think it's a film where it's going to be not a cult film. I think it's going to be a very strong hit. Not like straight out Compton hit, but when this opens in America, I could see a sort of 40 million opening weekend, because, you know, it's that type of quality. But then again, this is rated 18 over in England. I think in America, it'll either be rated R or is it NC-17, which
yeah,
is
that's
when
the
they're
next
tough.
one.
And I reckon this could be one of them 17 rated films. But then again, I still think a lot of people will flock to see this, and you'll have a good time. You might not like the tone of it, and I think that's going to be your sort of downside if you don't like it, but you've got to put it behind you because it's great.
Yeah, I think that's all down to personal preference, isn't it? And I think, as you're saying, like with NC-17, I think that the US very much crackdowns on profanity, and there is a lot of that in this movie as well as the violence. So it'd be an interesting one to watch. But I do think that this is a movie that's going to do well with word of mouth, and I think it's definitely one that's incredibly rewatchable. And like, if you're with a group of mates and they say like, "Oh, there's nothing on," it's like, "Oh, let's go and see Legend again," because I do think it has legs, and I do think it's a good one for multiple viewings. So I hope it really does well because it deserves to.
What is that?
I come here for a proper shootout. A shootout, right? It's a shootout!
Like a Western.
Your brother, he's a loose cannon. We need you to do something about Ron.
I can't do that. He's my brother.
And that's our review on Legend. Let us know in the comments what you think of Legend. Have you seen it? Do you want to see it? Get involved with the channel. We're going to move on to our 2 final segments of the show before we close out today. So we're going to get onto our usual segment of film fights. How film fights works is we take a characters or situation or anything we want and we pit them against each other in a fun little what if fight to see who comes out on top. So today we're going to have a special sort of, I won't even say boxing fight, it's just a kind of wacky one this week really. We're going to have the Craze versus Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. We've got to keep it equal, so we've got the Cray twins, so we've got to have 2 people against them. That's Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. Very interesting one. I'm not exactly sure of the logistics of this fight or what they'll be fighting with. So are the Crays armed with knuckle dusters and hammers in this one, or is this a straight up fisticuffs fight?
I think I want to go straight at fist fight because I'm on the crazy end. Although Apollo Creed and Rocky, they're both world champion boxers. Apollo Creed got knocked out by the gigantic Russian, and I think if one thing I'm going to go with is Ronnie Cray tells me anything that he can knock out anyone, probably with his fist too. And also the one thing we kind of had quite the craze with amateur boxers when they're younger and they chose not to go into that sport. So it's one of them where it's going to be a very tough, evenly fought match.
First off, I want to say Apollo Creed didn't get knocked out by Ivan Drago.
Oh yeah, well that's
he got
taken out. He got taken out. He's gone. Do you know what I mean? And yeah. I reckon Ronnie Cray would kill him.
See, this is a difficult one because we've seen Rocky himself fight in a street environment in Rocky V, which is a lot of people's least favourite Rocky movie. And he did almost die to Billy Gunn, but you've got to take into consideration he was old at that time. This was when all of his previous boxing injuries had sort of like all caught up with him and his health was deteriorating. So it all depends when Rocky's going to fight. If he's going to fight in his prime, if you're going to take like Rocky 3 or Rocky 4 Rocky and put him in this fight, I think it's an instant win for Rocky because we've seen that his strategy for Clubber Lang in 3 and Ivan Drago in 4 is to basically rope-a-dope, but he doesn't rope-a-dope by like dodging the punches. He just takes every single punch to the face and keeps on fighting, and I think he beats out Clubber Lang in the 3rd round, and I think he beats Ivan Drago. I think that goes the distance. I think that goes to like round 15. So we know that he's got stamina, he can stay in this fight. Apollo Creed as well, you know, fantastic fighter. He was the champion during Rocky 1 and Rocky 2 still as well until he lost that fight to Rocky. But Ivan Drago was like a super machine. He was like juiced up. He was almost like a robot. So of course he was going to lose that fight. The Craze, as you said, like they had boxing history, and we know that they're more brawlers than strategic fighters. And I think that Apollo Creed, being a boxer, has the strategy to, you know, suss them out, see their fighting style, dodge the punches, and then, you know, counter back with his own. Rocky Balboa will probably just take all the punches from both of the Craze but keep on fighting till the end. So I'm going to give the edge to Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed in this fight.
See, I think with the Craze though, you know, you're talking Rocky's going to take the punches. These guys know how to punch, and it's not your boxing punch. This is knuckles. This isn't boxing gloves. I think they'd have Rocky knocked out if he's trying to take him. Apollo Creed will be interesting. I don't know how it would fare against them. I've only seen him fight in Rocky 1, 2 and 4. You know, the Craze Mercer's taken everyone, but I think the way I'd see it is if it was, you know, they're having a fight, you just know that the Craze would say something, you know, oh yeah, fucking Adrian. Do you know what I mean? They would have some psychological battle going on there. You know, they might have known about Creed's son. Said, you know what, we've got your son hostage. They just beat the shit into Apollo Creed until he cries. I think the Craze would be fighting dirty, and I think they're the sort of people that they wouldn't stop. I think they just keep going, even if they're basically knocked out. They're going to keep going and going and going and going until they get what they want.
I agree with that to an extent, but also Rocky was taking punches from Ivan Drago, whose highest registered punch was 2,150 pounds of pressure per square inch. So I don't think that the Craze are going to throw punches that much, so I think that Rocky will stay in this fight. I think this is going to come down to a draw this week, because I definitely think that, if not Rocky, definitely Apollo are the more strategic fighters, where, as I said, like you see the Craze in the movie where like the scrapping on the floor, it's very much sort of like, you know, like poking eyes, it's getting people in headlocks, it's brawler fighting, whereas I think that Apollo and Rocky are smart enough to keep the distance, jog round them, suss them out, and then go in with an attack. And I think that I think the Krays will put up a good fight. I think they'll still. I think it'll be an equal match between Rocky and Apollo in terms of stamina and keep getting up once they've been knocked down. But I think in terms of the actual outcome, I think Rocky and Apollo have the edge in this fight. But I
might have to give it to Rocky because I think I don't know. I've seen him lose a few times, but strategically, I think you've got the point on there. But I think this is one of them matches that it's far too even.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be one of them where the two of them going to gang up on the other or something. But I think I'll have to give the edge to Rocky or a draw. I don't have a clue how that would finish, to be fair.
I think a much more equal fight would be like the Krays against Tom Hardy's character from The Warrior or something, because I think fighting-wise, I think they're very similar in terms of scrappers. But if we're going from this fight, I think I've got to give it to the boxers in this fight. So the winner for this week, Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed, but this was definitely a tough fight, so let us know in the comments who you think would win in the fight between the Krays, Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. Get involved. And now we're going to finish off with our final segment of the show, Recommended Movie, before we close out our show. How Recommended Movie works is each week we take it in turns, choosing a film for our midweek show film club that ties in with whatever we reviewed in our main show. So today was obviously Legends, and it's my choice, so I've got to pick a film that ties in with that. So really this week it was kind of open shop to pick anything, really. It's definitely a film where, like, you look at the cast, it's got an absolutely awesome supporting cast that I could go from, and like the filmmaker as well. As I said, like the director, he wrote LA Confidential, one of my favourite films. He wrote Mystic River, which is a classic Clint Eastwood movie which I haven't actually seen yet, but I've heard nothing but good things from. But I narrowed it down to a few films, and I think I'm going to go from a different link. I'm going to go with the guy who did the music with this film, which was Carter Burwell, who's done the music to quite a few films, but there's one on his particular list that I've heard great things from, and I've never seen. I think it's meant to be a really fun film, so I'm going to go with a little film from 2012 called Seven Psychopaths. I've seen the cast in it, as I say, like Colin Farrell, Sam Rockwell, Woody Harrelson, Christopher Walken, and you say Christopher Walken, I am instantly there, because that guy is amazing. So I don't know if it was a big budget movie. I don't think it was, but I know that a lot of people love it and a lot of people rate it quite highly, and I've never seen it. It's one I want to check out. So Seven Psychopaths is the one that I've nominated for this week's film club, and that'll be part of our joint film club review with Attack the Block, and then obviously now Seven Psychopaths as well. So that's going to be a hell of a double feature.
Oh, definitely.
So have you seen Seven Psychopaths before? Or?
Oh yes, I'm very fond of it. I think it's brilliant, and I think you're going to like it.
Right, okay. So yeah, I'll give those two a watch, and then we'll get that to you later on in the week, probably around Thursday or Friday, sometime like that. But that's our main show for today, so be sure to rate, like, comment, subscribe. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinemasavvy. We're on Twitter at twitter.com/cinema_savvy, and we're also on letterboxd.com/cinema_savvy as well. So let us know what you thought of Legend, let us know what you think of the outcome for film fights, and let us know what you think of Seven Psychopaths, I guess, in our film club reviews. So next week on our main show we'll be reviewing the latest Jake Gyllenhaal movie, but I guess it's like a massive supporting cast, so I won't really say he's the main one. That's going to be Everest. I saw the trailer for that when I went to see Legend. It looks absolutely incredible. Can't wait for that. That's going to be an immense big screen experience. So that will be our main show next week, and then obviously this Thursday will be our joint film club review of Attack the Block and Seven Psychopaths. So until then, thank you very much for listening.